Good morning, Trump's family. Merry Christmas and Happy Monday, y'all. Thank you for always watching and subscribing to the channel. Alright, without further ado, let's get into the news. Guess what? We're coming close to what Democrats keep saying is the anniversary of January 6th. I could pretty much promise you every single year on January 6th, Democrats are going to make a big deal more political theater, but they just keep beating a dead horse. Let's be real. They keep telling us that they have new damning evidence and information that's going to blow the lid on this whole thing. It's going to expose the conspiracy that Donald Trump was supposedly at the top of, but they never have anything. It's nothing but a bluff every single time. There's no new information. We haven't learned anything new about January 6th, from any of the Democrat media's coverage investigations or any of the commission's investigations. And that's because they're not asking the right questions. They're not asking really any questions from a perspective of openness. They're not actually trying to learn, they're trying to craft a narrative. However, if they were asking questions, and I guess the reason why they aren't, well, then stuff like this would purpose, which doesn't exactly help their narrative. In fact, it completely decimates their narrative. Finally, people are asking the right questions and it's looking real bad for Nancy Pelosi, these little J6 narrative. Let me show you guys exactly what I mean with this new bombshell report. Alright folks, we'll take a look at this from the Blaze Media report. Pelosi and Democrat leadership played a critical role in creating Capitol security plan that failed during January 6th protest. A group of House Republicans released a damning counter-report on Wednesday detailing key insights ignored in the narrative carefully constructed by Democrat-led January 6th Select Committee concerning the Capitol protest in 2021. The 141-page report, penned by 5 Republicans originally nominated to sit on the House January 6th Select Committee, reveal how House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, his office, and the Democrat leadership were closely involved in security decisions in the lead up to and on January 6, 2021, and noted that the reason why the Capitol was ultimately left unprepared on the day of the protests. You know, we've been talking a whole lot about PSYOPs. Well, the events of January 6th might be one of the biggest. You know, if you're being honest and asking the right questions, there is so much that doesn't make sense. Why were Capitol police officers opening doors, allowing people to enter the building? Why was Donald Trump's team request for extra Capitol police officers denied by Nancy Pelosi? Why was a proper barricade not set up when they, by the way, knew based on FBI analysis that there was a credible security concern on the day of? Of course there's a massive protest mob planning to show up. You need security. There could be bad actors looking to instigate, and we know the psychological phenomenon of mob mentality and how it plays out. And a really important question to ask is, why was Nancy Pelosi, his daughter, present on the day with a film crew filming a documentary, almost as if they knew what was going to happen before it happened, so they can get video footage to paint Democrats within a certain light as saviors of the Republic? And yeah, I know a liberal hive mind, PolitiFact, already fact-checked this. Donald Trump authorized up to 20,000 now National Guard troops to protect the Capitol before January 6th, but was rejected by Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. PolitiFact Truthometer writes this statement as false. Fact-check false, they say, except there's actual Capitol Police documents from the DoD which essentially confirmed this. We have this from NBC News 15. All of the information from this article comes from this right over here, which is a department timeline for the United States Capitol Police, a timeline of events for January 6, 2021. Attack just hours after Gallagher's rejection of DLDS offer for troops. Capitol Police issued a warning to its commander and executives, as well as to congressionally appointed House and Senate Sergeant of Arms or Sergeant at Arms responsible for congressional security. The timeline shows within 24 hours of the new assessment circulation, then Chief of Capitol Police Steve Sund changed course and began requesting permission to deploy National Guard troops from the House and Senate Sergeant at Arms, both of whom report to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Democrat leader Chuck Schumer respectively. That request was denied. CLP Sund asked Senate Sergeant at Arms SSAA Michael Stenger and House Sergeant at Arms HSA Paul Irving for authority to have National Guard to assist with security for the January 6th event based on briefing with law enforcement partner and revised intelligence assessment. The timeline notes CLP Sund's request as denied. SSA and HSA Tailcop Sund to contact General Walker at DC National Guard to discuss the Guard's ability to support a request if needed, as Sund's requests were denied. The Trump administration continued working on getting then-President Trump to formally authorize the deployment of as many as 20,000 National Guard troops to the Capitol ahead of the January 6 rally. According to Justin News, which conducted interviews with an acting Defense Secretary Christopher Miller and his Chief of Staff Kash Patel, the Capitol Police timeline shows what we have been saying for the last year. The DoD support via the National Guard was refused by the House and Senate at Arms, who report to Pelosi said Patel, "Now we have it in their own writing days before January 6, and despite the FBI warning of potential for serious disturbance, no perimeter was established. No agents put on the street and no fence hooked up." And finally, we have House Republicans launching an investigation, writing a report and getting to the bottom of it. The publication of this evidence that Pelosi and other Democrats may have been instrumental in rendering the Capitol vulnerable to infiltration by protesters comes just days after the House Speakers Committee recommended that former President Donald Trump be hit with criminal charges. We said then that we would investigate and get to the bottom of why the Capitol was left so unprepared that day and what needs to be done to make sure that our security apparatus is never left so unprepared. Again, U.S. Capitol Police Intelligence and Interagency Coordination Divisions allegedly failed to warn us CPE leadership and line officers about the threat of violence, despite the fact that the analyst gathered intelligence that clearly indicated a need for hardened security posture. The compartmentalization of actionable intelligence also occurred elsewhere for partisan reasons. Then House Sergeant at Arms Paul Irving reportedly succumbed to political pressures from the office of Speaker Nancy Pelosi and House Democrat leadership. Irving is said to have coordinated closely with the Speaker and her staff to have left Republicans out of important discussions related to security and to have been micromanaged by Pelosi herself ahead of January 6. This proved to be particularly problematic since Irving, then a critical member of the Capitol Police Board, had an obligation to all members, staff and USCP officers to keep them safe by consulting stakeholders without partisan preference. Essentially, the individual in charge of congressional security, Mr. Irving, shut out Republicans from security prep talks ahead of J6 and instead allegedly conspired with Nancy Pelosi behind closed doors, which is another extremely fishy little tidbit of information that continues to pile up on all of these questions that we have of the events. Pelosi suggested on February 9 that she had no power over the Capitol Police. Ridiculous. This report underscores how that was a false statement, given that Irving carried out his duties in clear deference to the Speaker, her staff and other Democratic staff, setting a number of other instances in which Pelosi exerted control over security measures on the Hill. Pelosi, who has repeatedly denied having agency or influence regarding Capitol security on January 6, named her first fall guy the day after the protests. Pelosi forced Irving's resignation on January 6, despite his apparent fidelity. If you ask me, folks, the whole thing was a trap. Democrats set up this whole ploy so they can continue to gaslight the American public about the dangers of Republican extremism. They created the vulnerability, they egged the whole thing on, they friggin' opened doors. I mean, there were magnetically locked doors that Capitol security just unlocked for people to walk in. And so on the anniversary of January 6, as we approach it, the only thing that I will be thinking about is how Nancy Pelosi was probably most likely allegedly at the center of all of it. If you appreciate these updates, please smash that like button, put your comments down below. Thanks for being here, folks. Big hug, ciao, goodbye, God bless.